and asked if, if you're interested, please attend. There'll be opportunities to learn about it. I'm guessing you probably won't be playing, but
Why not?
well, I guess you could use the left. Anyway, that's going on. The other thing that I would like to mention is a citizen reached out to me on Monday, I believe it was. This person lives in the 1500 block of Butte, and apparently, if you think about Butte, it's the street north of Prospect. And apparently there's been, well, also to narrow it down to the 1500 block of Butte, if you think of the snail, it's that block. Anyway, there's been quite a bit of vehicular, both motorcycle and automobile speeding in the area, pretty significant, to the point where she summarized it. Truly, someone is going to get killed on the street. So that being a safety issue, I kind of presented that to Mr. Burton, and he's I might just hand it off there. And the reason I share this with you is maybe ultimately after their assessment, they find a solution. Let's say it's a four-way stop sign or a speed bumps or whatever it happens to be. Maybe ultimately gets back to us, maybe not, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up that this is happening down on Butte. So
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor and commissioners, after Commissioner Logan contacted me, I reached out to the police chief, who reached out to the resident who had the concerns. I think that we're right now analyzing it, but we do intend on patrolling it further. Is there anything that you'd like to add, officer?
Well, we sent out to all the shifts supervisors that we want extra patrols, and they're documented in calls for service in that area. It's also sent out to the DUI officer so that he starts at 6 p.m. that he can be down in that area, strictly working traffic to see if we can catch who was doing this.
thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, just a question for Manager Burton. I was going to raise an issue related to the last budget discussion. Would you prefer that come now or with the new addition of the line on consensus, which would going forward on budget things? If we have matters from previous meetings, how would you like to do that?
I think the preference of the mayor.
Go ahead.
Okay,
That would be.
now is fine. Okay. And with apologies, I had to leave the meeting briefly when we talked about the pool, and I did finally go back and have time to watch the meeting and have asked a couple of questions. And so in addition to receiving some information and hearing from many members of the community, I would like to suggest that we revisit the idea of closing the pool on the weekends. I know we're still working on numbers, but the numbers I did see reflect a shortened day, and some of the numbers are in the 400s per day, particularly on Saturdays and Sundays. It wasn't always Saturday or Sunday, that was more. But as a person who has often taken a child to the pool on the weekends, I think that is a critical service for the community when it's hot. There's no camps on the weekends. And again, I have heard from many people that this is something people feel pretty strongly about. I understand budget constraints, but I would suggest that maybe if we could reconsider fees and even consider opening the pool for more hours on the weekend at higher fees, we may be able to balance some of the revenue issues, because again, when we're seeing 450 people in a day, that tells me that that is a service that is important. So I would like to be able to go back to that item, and have a further discussion on it before we make a decision about pool closures at all, shortened season, shortened days, what have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
a question springing off of Commissioner Reed's is, have those decisions been made?
No,
No.
Mayor, they have not. They're proposed through my office. So the decisions, like I just listed off in my last comments, some of them are represented in the draft budget I've presented, and we've talked about it. The commission has made no decisions, and so we have a list of decision items that will be coming forward, and we'll just go right down the list. So the commission has not made any decision relative to the pool. one of the reasons why I proposed it the way I did is I have real concern when the pool budget, the operating budget increases by over $200,000 in one operating year, and how many years can we sustain that? Because the pool budget is presented still shows an increase of 120,000 in operating budgets compared to last year. But I'm hearing loud and clear Commissioner Reed's concern. I think that we can do some options that we can bring back to the commission before we take the draft budget in a preliminary sense across the hallway. So
Okay.
I think there's more time to work on it. We'll come back with some options if you're interested,
Sure.
and continue the discussion.
Mr. Mayor, just to follow, so reason I asked is I got a call from a citizen today that was quite concerned about the perception from her perspective was that decisions had been made. So I just wanted to clarify that they have not. So then if there's a, I don't know how we communicate that to the public, but
Yeah, it's kind of a-
No, it's not. It
yeah,
hasn't been.
right. But I mean, more broadly than that, I think might be a concern. I don't mean.
If, Mr. Mayor, can I have a follow-up point?
Yeah, I just wanted to.
It sort of relates to that, if it's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Manager Burton. I think part of the reason I raised it, and forgive me if I worded it clumsily, is that I know the decision hasn't been made, but since there is a budget number and then a discussion around the policy that impacts that budget number, I'm hopeful that we can have a discussion about the, the sort of the pool policy and things like that before we make a decision on the number.
Yep.
And I do think it's important that we all make sure people understand that these are discussions about budget. Decisions are not being made yet.
Right.
Because sometimes things get reported in the press in a way that the subtleties of how we do it are not super clear. But I am grateful for the opportunity to revisit these discussions before we have to make budget number decisions.
And a way we could turn over to Manager Burton to, he has access to IR. We can always let him know that these discussions are being made and they're not final.
Yeah.
And we have the PIO who can also put it on the webpage, put it, everywhere else.
Yeah, and Mayor, I would just add that part of, and of course, you've been through more recent budgets as elected officials than I have, but starting with last year and this year, it's part about bringing structure back to the process. And I think by next year, particularly if, and you have made no decisions, but there is a request for a budget analyst in the position or in the budget, then we'll be able to operate in a manner where the fixed budget will be presented to the commission and recommended changes will be set off to the side. And that's pulling in all of our processes to a structure that is, I think it's workable, it's more predictable. I think it benefits decision makers more. So that when we're implementing salary changes across the board, that only works its way through the budget analyst and the budget office at a particular place and time. And bringing all that back in to a very predictable structure. We're not quite there yet, but I think that we are very close to where next year this process will be. I think where it needs to be, particularly on how it serves the commission and your ability to make informed decisions.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. I know at the end of the last meeting, when we discussed the pool, there was a request for kind of the breakdown of the numbers, and we got that today. So I think that'll be helpful to go through. One of the things that, and I'm going to guess that Kate will probably know this better than anyone, I think it would be really helpful if we could maybe get like some potential options of what it could look like. So something like an increased fees on the weekend, or if, I know part of the issue with the pool is that state law requires us to have a certain number of lifeguards on deck at all times. And so, if we close the splash park and leave, do those numbers change if we change different functions of the pool on the weekend. And will those options get us to a place where we can, fund it without causing more issues down the line? I don't know if there's any interest in even buying ourselves time just for this year, with other sources of general fund savings potentially, but I mean, it's also an issue. I can't imagine that pool costs will, go down like everything else, we just see increased costs. So I would be really interested to find out what options we might be able to have, and do all parts need to be open or only some parts, and that would be helpful.
We do have the ability to do that here. And so we'll gear up for that discussion and the other discussions that some of which I mentioned for decision time, and you'll be able to see how those decisions affect the bottom line of the budget as you walk your way through each of those issues.
So fast, last comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just say, but broader future looking, I think issues like this, we see it pop up in a number of different places. Issues of resident versus non-resident, taxes supporting this use, et cetera. I think I would like to, begin to consider things like recreation districts where we are addressing all of the resources we have, how they are being supported and who's using them. And I know that's a long-term discussion, but also just the general consideration of resident versus non-resident fees. I know it's not popular. I really do. I get it. But I think we have to look at ways to support the resources we have as we look to more sustainable things than every single year having this same discussion about how we can't support the resources we have and they are being used by people who are not contributing to them. Thanks.
I agree with you. I've been saying that forever, so I hear you too. Yes, Director Danielson.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. I just also wanted to add that we are bringing the resolution to increase the pool fees at our next commission meeting. I would recommend that we move forward with that so that we can continue to advertise those rate increases, and then we can revisit if we want to change that structure after that resolution is passed. So at least we can move forward with the hard work that the Parks Department did in putting together that fee schedule.
You bet.
Yep.
Any other comments from the commission before we can move on?
Mr. Mayor, on a different topic.
Go ahead.
Thank you. We received an email this week from the HCC that was regarding some of the non-motorized transportation advisory council's list of top 10 recommendations. Within there, I reached out to the HCC and I was asking for a little bit more clarity because it was simply a list of what they thought were priorities that should be funded in this year's budget, and some of it didn't quite connect with me, mostly because some of it I was not really sure as to what they were getting at on a few of the items, because we either had already dealt with them, they were in lawsuits, or had previously been budgeted for. And so I reached out and asked if they had dollar amounts on those other items that hadn't already been considered, and then how they would like us to think about those in context of the broader budget. And they did not consider dollar amounts, which was helpful to know. But with that, I thought this might be a good opportunity. I know David was on that email and can provide more information. I'm wondering if maybe, David, you can go through some of those items and just provide clarity, because I think if NIMTAC and the HCC maybe weren't clear as to where certain projects were, I'm going to guess the broader community isn't either. So I wonder if we could talk about some of that.
David, do you have dollar amounts?
A few.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner. So there was several under item B, finishing the Centennial Trail. There's already money allocated to pave that, and that's anticipated to happen this summer, to pave that section from the park to Bend. Number 6 was to the bridge over Henderson. as you know, you committed $75,000 to that. We have, as soon as and then number 7 is the easement from BNSF. So as soon as we receive that signed easement document, we can proceed with design on that bridge crossing, as well as the paving the trail from Benton to Joslin. None of that can take place until that easement is signed by BNSF, because we do not have our current easement right now at our current trail location requires no improvements to be made to that trail. So until we get this next easement, that section between Benton and Joslin is waiting on that.
Do you know if they're gonna sign it?
So, Mayor, they presented us a draft, and they had a 2-year construction time frame for us to do the improvements along the trail. We went back and asked them for 5, just for the simple fact that if we found the funding for a bridge, the steel for the bridges from a couple manufacturers is about 18 months out.
Oh,
So they realized that was a legitimate request, and it's under consideration right now with BNSF to make some minor tweaks to the construction agreement. So if they make that, I think the manager and the attorney and I are all comfortable signing that and getting back to them as soon as possible and get moving on this. Number 9, they had Benton crosswalks on Benton at Hauser and Stewart. We were already planning on looking at the feasibility of putting in rectangular rapid flash beacons and crosswalks at Stewart to facilitate people going to and from the Civic Center. Other opportunities obviously to look at down the road. And then some other, sidewalk safe routes to school. The manager and I have already conferred, and we're trying to get an RFQ together so that we can do an inventory of the entire city. And this one would show all the deficiencies, not just where we have sidewalks and where we don't, but where we have trip hazards, where we don't have compliant. Get that inventory done so we know what we have, so that we can actually create a plan that move forward with that, whether that's in conjunction with will be in conjunction with the sidewalk district or some other type of funding for sidewalks. Is ongoing discussion with the commission. So not to take any much time, but
sure, thank you.
Mayor, I'd just like to add that we have a quarterly meeting with School District 1. We proposed a joint safe routes to school study. They're very interested and they're going to reach out to East Helena. I've reached out to Lewis and Clark County so we can do a valley-wide safe routes to school study, knowing what we own, what condition it's in, and also analyzing what needs to occur relative to safe routes to school through a deliberate study. I think would be very helpful and help us make informed decisions relative to priority and cost.
You bet. Thank you. Commissioner, you done?
Nope, yep, that was it. It was really helpful once I connected with David, just because I felt like I was having deja vu when I read the letter and thought, wait. Haven't we dealt with some of this?
Recommendations from Helena Citizens Council, Representative John Andrews, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, I'll speak to this question first.
What question?
The
What, my
question
topic.
just raised by the Commissioner.
We have moved on. Then you're bringing me back.
Well, I need to address it in our.
But you need to be recognized. Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you. In our, the HCC had its monthly meeting last month. It was primarily for strategic planning, but in the course of that, NIMTAC brought up the 10 projects in the list that they were presenting to the commissioner. And we didn't have any dollar figures at HCC. We didn't prioritize any of those projects, but conceptually, we agreed with the value of all of those projects, if that helps answer the question a little further.
Thanks.
Beyond that, as I say, last month was our strategic planning meeting. So we put together a lot of brainstorming. We're still working on that. A couple of additional things are door hangers. Apparently, it's been an annual event that the HCC does. And each one of the members will be getting 50 door hangers, and we'll be going out and knocking on doors this month and in early June. We want to get the project completed by June 1 if we can. The other thing I wanted to mention, it came to my attention as a representative of District 1 that there was going to be a change in insurance requirements for special events. And specifically block parties is the issue that came up. My neighborhood, Pine Street, has always had annual block parties. I worked with the parking commission. Apparently there was 82 special permits issued last year, 12 of which were for block parties. The change that's happening this year is that there's going to be an insurance requirement for neighborhood block parties. And the cost of that for my insurance agent is going to cost about $245. And at this point in time, I don't think that the people that have organized block parties are aware that this change has happened. And just kind of informationally, it may be something that comes across your agenda when people come in and saying, what's this insurance that we have to do our annual block party?
That caught me off guard too. That amount. Can you say anything about that, Manager Burton?
Yeah,
Or
Mayor.
Doc,
Yeah,
please.
Mayor, commissioners, I've actually worked with Mr. Andrew on this as well. He brought it to my attention and looked into it and answered some questions. It is true that in the past, commission block parties have, or I'm sorry, block parties have been allowed exception to the insurance requirement in the past. But it was not it wasn't written that way within the actual code. So we are making it clear that everyone needs insurance when they use city right of ways and city owned property for private events. And so it probably feels to block parties like it is a change, but it has been a part of the code for, and I didn't look how long, but it has been the case for a while. So this may feel like a change, but it's really not a change within the code.
Okay.
Does that help?
Mr. Andrew, I apologize. I didn't know you were John Andrew also.
John R.
I don't know middle names, but I know the other John Andrew. And so
And we're in District 1.
that's where my confusion came from.
problem.
I
I kinda
apologize for
figured
that. So when she said Mr. Andrew, that's when I whispered to her and
I
said,
said it's the
"Is he
other
John?"
one.
My apologies.
One.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for Manager Burton or City Attorney Doctor. What are we doing to let the public know about this change? Are we?
Well, I think-
Your PIO.
Mayor, Commissioner, I think we're coming forward with the finalized ordinance, right?
Mayor,
Of which-
Mayor and Commissioners, we're coming forward with the finalized ordinance that's coming
Okay.
Monday. It's been out, it's been publicly noticed. And then once we get these changes, the PIO already has a page set up so that we can make it go live so that all this information will be on a special events page. So the guidelines, example insurance certificates, example traffic control plans, all this stuff will be all in one page and at basically folks' fingertips to read and understand what is needed moving forward.
And I would just add, Mayor, if I could, we've been working with MMIA, our insurance carrier. They've got several opportunities or several certified insurance companies that do this, I think, for a pretty reasonable price from what our discussions were. And certainly we can assist in that effort as well.
Okay, that would be good. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Mayor, thanks. So when the block parties go to do their permit request in the new online system, will it flags for them that they have to get that? Will it also flag for them that they can work with us to work with MMIA? Do they work with us to work with MMIA, or how does that happen?
Yeah, Mayor and Commissioners, we'll provide a link. MMIA actually has a link on the league site to insurance providers for special events because it is a statewide thing. So we'll provide that link as well and try to get the list of local providers. The biggest cost differential for these is whether it's just a block party or a block party with alcohol.
Yeah.
The alcohol tends to raise the cost of the insurance, but we'll definitely have those links on the page.
And then, just one more question. On these, they will be able to say like it's the Bentonia block party. They could, since the way that our new system set up is like similar, an event, if it's an annual event, can make their application and then pull up the same application year after year and change whatever the date or whatever it is. Will that work the same for the block party so that they don't have to start from ground zero every single year?
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, every event will be archived in M files. So if it's a reoccurring next year, because obviously this is our first year,
Yeah.
there'll be a radio button to click that says this is a reoccurring event. And then once that is, you basically enter the very little information, it'll pull all that stuff up. And then you just change your dates or whatever you change. Obviously, insurance certificates and stuff change. Sometimes minor changes for parade routes or whatever is also considered there, but yes, it's envisioned so that they do the work once, and if nothing changes, they just update us what's.
And I think maybe just for Mr. Andrew, if I can just one last thing. If you have feedback on the system, because it is new, I think that staff has been very open to wanting to see how the experience is and then adjusting things where they need to. So I hope you'll reach out if.
And Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, I'll provide a little bit right now because I've gotten permits in the past for our neighborhood. I was given a link to the online system that you've got. And first, I think it's great that you're doing it online. I think it's great that it's consolidating all the agencies that have to be involved in it. I would strongly suggest, though, right away when I looked at that link, the first thing that came on, it said, if you don't have insurance, don't even go any further than this. And there needs to be some explanation in there that says what the insurance is and why it's being done. And beyond that, where you can get it, because I went to 4 or 5 different insurance agencies, 2 or 3 of which said, we don't do that. My own independent insurance agent came up with a price of over $500 for the insurance. And I finally tracked down Payne West, who came up with $245 price tag. So anything you can do to make it easier for people and take the shock out of them is going to help, because it's going to come as a surprise if there actually were 12 neighborhood block parties last year. The other comment I'm going to have, the way that I've read the ordinance and the way the insurance people have told me, if there's alcohol there at all, regardless of whether it's being served, you got to have alcohol insurance. It doesn't make any, we're not a vendor. We don't provide it, but people take it from their homes and they get out on the street where the dance is and they're carrying beer and wine and what on the street. So the alcohol insurance has to be a part of the package.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following up on that point a bit, I know there had been some feedback about you can't fill out the permit without insurance, but you can't get insurance without the permit. And there was a little bit of a chicken and eggy situation happening there. Do we know if that's been addressed?
Mayor and Commissioners, I know that came up once, but we haven't ran into that problem yet with the new. The reason that we require the insurance is the way we're inputting the special event application. We don't have the ability to save it halfway through. So you have to have all your documents ready to go. So when you fill it out, you upload them and then you submit it. We're working on getting the ability to be able to save
That was my next question.
applications halfway through, so that if somebody forgets or doesn't have it, or the scan didn't come out right, they can save it and move forward. But that'll probably be an upgrade for next year's events.
Okay, thank you.
And I understand it's in a new format, but it's not very user friendly from what I saw thus far. Something more needs to be done.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Is your report
Yeah.
done? City manager report?
Mayor, I have no report.
Department reports, community development budget presentation. Director Brinks and Official Mac, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. I just want to say I'm excited and pleased to present my first community development budget to you. Woo-hoo! When I arrived with the city last year, you were already going through the budget process, and rather than interject myself into it, I'll let staff who have worked hard on the budget proceed with that, make those presentations. So I stayed out of the fray. So this is my first one. So community development is made of two divisions and two funds, two main funds, the planning, which is under the general fund, Fund 1401, and then the building department fund or division fund 503. And Ms. Mack will present that side of it. Within the planning fund, there are two sub funds, CDBG Home, Grant Fund 226, and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is Fund 229. So within the planning fund, we are proposing no organizational changes or considerations for fiscal year 2024 that will have a budgetary impact. There may be some internal things that we work through process-wise, but nothing that will have a budget impact. No planned FTE additions for this fiscal year, and we have no planned or expected capital outlays either. As a recap for 2023, keep in mind we are a general fund supported fund. Our revenue as adopted was 6,000. It's been projected that we will bring in from various sources, either permits or fees for some of our services. 13,300 expenditures, which this does include some vacancy savings within that. It was adopted at 879. Our expected expenditures for fiscal year 23 are 771,924. I will say that we have, with all but one vacancy, filled those three that have been out there for almost a year. So we've got one more fill. We hope we had that filled, but we might just have to go out and re-advertise for a planner position. For fiscal year 2024, we anticipate a revenue of 12,500, again, permits and then charge for services, with an expenditure for next year just shy of $1 million. Some of our considerations again for revenue, permits and charges for services. Some of our notable expenditures for this year, continuing with the $20,000 HTC allocation. I think that's Trolley is in that as well, if I'm not mistaken, addressing. Continuing with the housing navigator program of $30,000. We will start at our 5-year growth policy update. A lot has changed since 2019, and the last growth policy was adopted. Good standard practice because a lot has changed. COVID, 5 years. We will start a new planning project for growth policy. This current year, it is the 6th Ward Midtown plan that we're 3/4 of the way through. So you'll be seeing something out of that here shortly. This is our next planning project for next year. We do have some grant match funds set aside in this budget, and I'll go on those when we get to the CDBG section. And then we do have a new allocation, which we don't have currently, public notice signs. You may have seen our small orange land use signs around town for some cases. We're kind of changing how we're going to do that. I'm overly transparent with our processes. So we've doubled the size of those signs, and they will be one-time use, and they'll have a lot more information on the sign than what we have now. So to get started up for new signs, $4,500. And then there'll be a small allocation each year as we go through that inventory. And I do have some examples if you're interested in seeing what those actually look like. They'll remain orange for visibility, especially during the winter time. So our next fund, our CB, is there any questions overall for the planning fund? So the next sub fund is Fund 226. That's our CDBG home allocations. This is essentially a pass-through program. We are subrecipients, so we have to account for those funds that we get. Currently, we anticipate a revenue of just shy of $1.5 million. And I'll go through what those various grant programs are. Again, expenditures should be a wash. There is beginning cash in that fund of $5,200, and we anticipate that will stay the same. Not sure where that came from, other than we didn't fully allocate probably a program in the past. So it sits there in that CDBG fund that we've got. So there are 4 grant programs that will happen under this fiscal year with Helen Food Share, which was awarded just a couple months ago for their food resource center. The YWCA, you see their fund there, $607,000. Replace windows and some HVAC improvements to their building. Rocky Mountain Development Center, we own that building, but they're going to undertake a PAR to look at how best to set that center up for different programming. And there is a match portion to that since we own the building. And then the Main Street grant, Art Space is doing a feasibility study, looking for live, work, retail opportunities, especially in the downtown, but it is citywide. And there's a match portion associated with that as well. And that project is about $24,000.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the Main Street program, are we still managing that? Or I know that I believe BID was involved at one point, and then I think David might have been involved at one point.
So in the Art Space, BID is, of course, we're the pass through, we're the administrator of the program or the funds, but the BID is actually managing overall that project.
Okay, and they are going to continue to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. As well as some assistance from Impact as well.
Okay.
Impact's working on it as well. Any questions on the CDBG? Just for reference, I thought I had it in the presentation, but I don't. So the Rocky Mountain Development Center, that match is about $7,000. We're splitting that between community development and facilities. And then the Main Street is about $20,000 or $2,000. There is a balance there. We anticipate perhaps for this fiscal year that there'll be some opportunities to go after some more planning funds to help offset some of the cost for the growth policy update. So there's some set aside match funds just in case. Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So I'll pass on some exciting news here shortly, but currently, if you allocate the minimal allocation that's within the resolution of $100,000, that's a revenue for this year. Beginning cash balance of just over 2 million. Estimated cash balance 2.178 176. So we have one viable great project that applied for Affordable Housing Trust Fund that is working through the process now. We'll go to the trust fund board next Wednesday. If I get my dates right. And you'll see that come for you in June. That is a $1 million construction loan with a $400,000 long-term loan. Don't really have the specifics right in front of me. Ellie, I think, is online too. She might have more specifics on that particular project. But it's Affordable Housing Trust Fund over on the east side of town off 12. The roads escape me. And the number of units, 70, 78 units, 75, 45 units in that project.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a quick question?
Please. Yes.
Thank you, Director Brigg. Just a quick question. I know we had a timeline previously for when the Affordable Housing Trust Fund had applications due. Do we still have that biannual schedule, or are we doing it rolling? What's our timeline there?
So we haven't crafted. So yes, Mayor and Commissioners, we did have a biannual for the first round, which started in the fall. The second round started, we opened those up March 1st, closed those April 13th. We had 2 applications. One didn't really meet the criteria of the fund. The second one very much met the criteria, and that one's moving forward. For the next funding cycle, We may bring something different to you, perhaps engage you more in terms of priorities for that fund for the fall cycle starting. So you'll see more of that coming up, but we do still anticipate a biannual process. Staying on the same schedule, fall and spring.
Good question. So it's interesting that there were two applications. I know that we keep hearing about lots of people saying they're going to apply, but it seems that they haven't applied. Do we know why?
We don't. Those that reached out to us were viable in timing probably.
Okay.
We anticipated the fall might be difficult because everybody just wasn't ready at that point because it was just new. And then we anticipated more for the spring cycle just because that's when everybody gets accustomed to getting their projects funded, getting ready for construction, getting ready for the summer season. Don't really have a solid answer as to why. We're going to do a better job moving forward now that we've got a little bit under our belt to do some better PR for the next funding cycle.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a very quick follow-up. I'm wondering, did you hear anything about people holding back on making project decisions based on legislation that was sort of swirling around? Or was that not anything you picked up on?
That was nothing we really picked up on that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mayor. Director, can you talk about staffing for the Housing Trust Fund?
So we have a new housing coordinator that we just hired, just now starting. So that's fully funded or fully staffed. And so she will she'll be diving into it pretty deep since, you know, it goes before the Housing Trust Fund for this project next week. So and overall, like I said earlier, we have one open position in community development or in the planning side of community development.
Okay.
Any questions on my side?
Yep. Continue.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. The building division, as you can see, just to recap, and it looks like we're pretty much on target for what our adopted revenues was from last year. We may be just a little bit higher, you know, trying to figure out what those revenues are based on the amount of construction and stuff. We're always kind of hit and miss, so we're not sure. But I do believe that we're gonna be close to those numbers. And then with the help of Sheila and stuff, running through the revenues and things like that. The expenditures, we will be within our adopted expenditures on that. The beginning cash balance is our building department revenue funds. And I think we'll use just a little bit of that this year. Of note, the governor has signed a bill that increased our revenue funds from carrying 12 months expenditures to 36 months. So that'll give a little bit more flexibility on making sure that going forward, good years and bad years, that we will have funds for the department. So for FY24, through my research and stuff, and the building valuation data table, we're looking at the cost of construction itself is they're estimating anywhere from an 8 to 16% increase in the cost of construction. And it was in residential multifamily just under 8%, single family nearly 11% increase in the cost of construction. That's just materials and labor at this point. So our revenues, based on that cost of construction, our revenues, I anticipate being in that 7 to 8% increase. Our expenditures with the transition of the software company that we're using for our permitting, we will decrease some of our expenditures in that cost this year because of the allocation of the ARPA for some of the track it or the Tyler Technologies, thank you. So, and again, then our cash reserves, numbers there are shown. Again, that approximately an 8% increase is what we're kind of anticipating on those revenues with the square foot evaluation. They're showing there. The other thing with the cash reserve fund that we have, there was with the interest rates going up, there was a substantial increase in our interest income on that. So I was surprised to see that. And we got that. As far as notable expenditures, we did see a little bit of increase there. You know, the proposed, you know, step increases with staff, and then if there's any of the proposed COLA that we might have. We are asking for an additional line item for clothing and boot allowance. Our inspectors over the years have always just used their own personal equipment, boots. This time of year, spring, fall, snowy, it gets muddy. And so they've roomed their own clothing and stuff. And so I propose that we give them an allowance for getting some work equipment. Computer equipment and supplies, an increase in that. That's just the cost of stuff that new stuff we have to get, stay on top of that. The track it software currently that we are using, we'll have a transition period before we start up with Tyler Technologies, so there's still going to be some cost on that. The additional costs, estimated increase with the fire marshal who does a lot of our does a plan reviews based with our building permitting, and then those new building inspections and stuff, we help fund that cost for him. More buildings, more commercial buildings, bigger buildings, more time it takes to do those. So that's where that increase is. The capital outlay, we have no anticipated capital outlay for FY24. We did get our new vehicle finally, ordered that in December of 21. I'm driving it. So that was good. Thank you, David. And based on housing projects for the affordable housing fee waivers, depending on timing and stuff, and what our budget looks like at the time that those are applied for, we may have that affordable housing fee waiver. It can't really budget for those because we don't know what those numbers are, but that's where our building reserve fund is very helpful.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The affordable housing fee waivers, I should know this, and I do not, have we considered looking to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for those? I don't know if we have restrictions in there. Again, I should know this and I do not, but I wonder if that would be something that we could consider. I mean, since it is affordable housing and fee waiver seems to be in line with the general spirit of things. Have we considered that?
Well, I think depending on, I'm not very familiar with the trust fund, but the fee waiver would be if they're building a large affordable housing project. The waiver is for building permits, plan review fees, and things like that. So I would think that if it does qualify for that under the ordinance for the fee waiver, that they may have both.
Mr. Mayor, Commission, yet the way the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is structured now, it's a low interest loan program. So unless we altered the program, which is totally doable, it would be, again, the spirit of what the trust fund is for. Using those, they could better stack the capital requirements for affordable housing project using both of those. But the way it's structured now, it's not not within the program guidelines of the trust fund.
Thanks.
Really quick on that, I think we had some of those discussions and we adopted the fee waiver ordinance resolution. I don't know which it was anyway. And the spirit of it was, what's another way that we can do something internally so that if we can't necessarily, you know, we have the $100,000 minimum a year, what's another way for us to help? And I think the only project that has applied for it was Red Alder.
And the tower.
Oh, and the fire
up here.
tower. Yep,
Fire
you're right.
tower up here also
And
recently.
yeah, and that, I think Red Alder, I just went to my notes, it was $235,000 that we ended up waiving, which was, you
That
know,
included
more than
CC.
double what we're gonna be able to invest in some years, depending on what our budget is, so. I think it's important that we have both
Mhm.
as a way for us to help.
Please continue, Ms. Mack.
That is the end of my presentation.
Okay, comments or questions from the commission?
Mr. Mayor, really briefly, I have a question because I think that I believe, and if this is for Mr. Brink, that the Lewis and Clark County City Preservation, Historic Preservation Board, you know what I'm talking about.
Historic Tourism Commission.
Thank you.
That was this-
Yesterday, I don't know if you were listening to our joint city county. Okay, you were. It's in this part of your budget, and so I'm wondering if we can maybe. I don't know if we're using the term parking lot again this year, but wherever we're keeping the list of items to consider adjustments in, I would really like for us to see if we can find like an extra $35,000 on top of our 20,000 for us to, and I see Ms. Danielson might have an answer.
Director Danielson, you have the floor.
Mayor, if I might address Commissioner Dean's comment. So I have reached out to the county to understand more of the operating budget for the historic preservation office. And so they're gathering that information for us. We will be bringing that back to the commission as a decision point. With that, you know, as I get a better understanding of what their budget entails and bring that back to the commission on the 17th for a decision point on funding, not only for that, but for several other items that the commission will be making decisions on funding community programs and this particular service as well.
Thank you. Any other comments for Director Brink or Ms. Mack? Okay, Transportation Systems Budget Presentation, Director Kanapi or Deputy Director Hui?
You guys both today, Mayor.
Huh?
You guys both today, so sorry.
Oh, you got 10 minutes. According to my list here.
I will have to excuse myself at that point.
So Mayor and Commissioners, this is the transportation systems budget discussion. Rest of the PowerPoint catch up. Both Chris and I will be presenting these budgets and we'll be starting off with streets. Will be the first one.
Mayor and Commissioners, as you've come to expect from us, we are a little bit extra in our presentation. So this year, it's fully functioning ticker tape.
I was looking forward to this.
Oh, my God.
And in the spirit of transparency, we'll take you behind the curtain. So transportation has our four main divisions, right? Streets and traffic, street, parking, transit. We'll start off with our streets and traffic. Consists of the three funds that sort of work in conjunction with each other. It's our street maintenance, the original gas tax, and the BARSA. And so we'll have some conversations as we get through the funds about the changes coming for gas tax and BARSA. But I'll let David kind of run through some of our main points here.
Yeah, so No full reconstruction projects on the slate for this year or the coming years. We're shifting to more of a maintenance mode where we're going to be doing a lot of mill and overlays, a lot of chip seals to seal up the roadways that we have. Not to say that they're not coming up in the budgets, but we're electing to go with the no reconstruction. The one that is on the horizon potentially is reconstruction of the mini malfunction junction down here. Kind of the gateway to downtown, right there by T-Mobile. So that's in our 5-year plan. The other thing is, we're looking at street maintenance funds as more curb to curb, including ADA ramps, and the ADA ramps are required to be brought up to current code or requirements if we're going to add asphalt. So a mill and overlay is considered an alteration in the DOJ's eyes. So if we are doing a mill and overlay, the year prior, we'll be out there doing the curb ramps where there are sidewalks present. So if there are no sidewalks present, we're not putting in those curb ramps until the sidewalks come into play. So we're looking using our gas tax and our BARSA funds as our pavement preservation program. And basically identifying each one of those with these for a specific chip seal or mill and overlay projects, and that's where the funding will come from on a regular basis. As Chris noted, with some legislative changes, we'll be seeing a little bit different there. From what we've been told, the old BARSA will be phased out and it will just all come in as a gas tax. So we'll be, instead of having the two funds, it'll all just be the one gas tax, so we'll be splitting those up in future budgets. The vehicles, equipment, planning and operations will be funded through the street maintenance assessment. That includes all our vehicle replacements, salaries and whatnot. And then we'll be talking with you in the near future here about revised street methodology moving forward. So we'll get into 201. With that, we'll be presenting with the street methodology. We'll be presenting what the other cities are doing as far as street assessments, and then we'll walk you through what our proposals or our options are, and have that discussion with you and the commission.
Okay, so for 201, the street maintenance fund, as far as revenues go this year, like we said, we'll be looking to have the discussion mostly on revising the methodology of the assessment. At this point, we aren't necessarily looking to do a rate increase for FY24. We can cover everything that's in the budget within the current rate. So I think it's more important for us to focus on trying to get the methodology nailed down before we try to move forward with any increases. We have our sort of conservative interest projections. It was a nice present this year, but as we've seen the last couple of years, they haven't been real high. So we left that one pretty conservative. Surplus sales, obviously we try to get rid of things as we get replacements for them. Sometimes getting replacements takes a while, so you never really know how much you're going to get out of the surplus. So as a wait, no, it's the wrong one. Okay, let's go back. Sorry, there was another picture there's supposed to be. So in your packets, you'll have copies of our 5-year CIP plan. And you'll see one that hopefully has some blue and pinks on it. That is our sort of rate analysis table. And so again, when we have that larger conversation about the methodology and where rates are, we'll get more in depth into this. But the idea here for street maintenance is to try and maintain a level of about a $1.5 million capital. You guys not have one?
Mayor and Commission, I apologize. I thought that was going to be handed out at the meeting, so I can get copies to you.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks.
So, I'll keep it real brief. So the idea for us is to try and maintain a level of about 1.5 million a year for capital within the street maintenance assessment. And so when you get that, and we'll talk about it more again as we get to that meeting, but you'll see that we have some version of an unfunded capital year to year, and then a version of what's unfunded just based on that $1.5 million goal. And so if you try to just make the rate match the individual capital for that year, it's very fluctuating, right? It could be 7% one year, it could be nothing next year. If we try to stick to that $1.5 million goal, it really averages itself out to be between 1.5% and 2% per year that we could adjust the rate and stick with that schedule.
Yeah, so some notable expenditures, instead of desktops, for supervisors above, we're moving to laptops, to provide that mobility. In our engineering services, we're doing a congruency study, which is similar to a water model, but it's traffic projection. So when we get a subdivision that comes in, we can enter their data into their TIS data into this model, and it'll show us the impacts across the board, not just at the within a block or two. So as they come on board, we can add those on, and it'll just keep a cumulative aspect of what our impacts are. Our asphalt chip seal, like I talked about, we moved into the 240 and 241. So we have $100,000 for rectangular rapid flash beacons. It's not typically we didn't put it in the capital this year because we felt the need, but there was some intersections out there that we could tackle this year through some maintenance money. And not all of them been identified yet, but we want to make sure that we bring enough in so we can get them planted and get them up and running to make some of these crossings safer. The 60,000 in office space. So in our welding shop that we have gigantic ceilings that go up, like 30 feet. And since we're being limited on space and trying to keep our vehicles warm in the wintertime, we're proposing to put a mezzanine level up there for storage of some of our summer items like our curb machines, our curb painting machines and signs and everything, get them up off the floor, open up that floor space for vehicles. So in the wintertime, we can pull them in and keep them warmer than sitting at 10 below. We have 3 plow trucks, 2 passenger vehicles, and a sweeper in our budget this year. Most of our trucks that we're replacing are nearing 20 years old or older. And so our mechanics have done a great job keeping them up and running, but they're nearing the end of their life. The sidewalk program has been moved to the 440 as discussed, and our preliminary plan for our vehicle storage is in this year's budget to get a bigger building so that we can house these vehicles instead of trying to cram them into the shop every night to have a warm storage, basically vehicle storage building with some offices and locker rooms for the staff. We also on those in the plans for that is solar panels and then EV charging stations as we try to continue to move forward with the sustainability objective of the city.
And so Mayor and Commissioners, along that line, we have already made contributions to the rest of the world with electric vehicles, where we ran into a little issue with one of the parts on our electric sweeper. The manufacturer came and took a look at it, said, well, that's not supposed to happen. So they re-engineered that part so that it doesn't happen again. They're going to kind of treat it as a recall issue with any that are outstanding right now and give the upgrade to everyone. And they'll make that change going forward on all their units that they manufacture going forward. So making the world a better place.
I hear you. Just one question. I know it's not in this, but what's the Jefferson School project there, that flashing light project?
So those rectangular rapid flash beacons were installed a couple months ago. And they're working from what I understand. You see this?
So Mayor, those are the ones that where you push the button and it does the flash.
So it's a pedestrian actuated so that you don't have the the blinking yellow
Right.
light that everybody kind of gets
Okay.
accustomed to, and then they kind of ignore it. So these pedestrian actuated lights will only go on when you're crossing, and we have seen
Dodge.
very high levels of compliance with drivers with these pedestrian actuated ones instead of the ones just flashing.
And if I might just add briefly, thanks also to our friends at Helena Police Department for helping enforce the speed limit. For continuing effort to slow people down, all of the things together have made a huge difference there, so thank you.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any questions on 201 before we move to the gas tax parcel area?
Right.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple questions. I know that we've been talking about the sidewalks more broadly in the sidewalk summits. I don't think we have anything budgeted in the 201, but then it also says pending budget from general capital.
Sure, so,
What does that mean?
so Mayor and Commissioners, are you referring to the sidewalk?
The
loan
sidewalk
program?
loan program, yes.
So the program has been moved to the 440 fund.
Okay.
So essentially, it was Director Danielson may explain it better than me in accounting terms, but the loans are being originated in the street maintenance fund and being swept to the 440 for tracking and collecting of payments.
Okay, so once we get to the 440, that's more.
Correct.
And we'll still administer the program and still provide the inspection and all that for the sidewalks.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may also
Please.
address that, so because sidewalks can't be funded from the streets and its assessments. That again will be another decision point for how the city wants to fund that particular program. The streets fund did front the money for last summer, but going forward, we won't have them front the money at all. That'll come from our general capital to be able to front that money, and the decision on how much to fund that program each year will be a decision point for you as well, and we'll be bringing that on the 17th as well.
Roger that.
No, that's one.
Yeah, right.
Is there room, and I didn't see it in here, so I'm hoping, was there any funding left over for us to think about utilizing the LiDAR or the sidewalk conditions, or is that something we need to think of other ways?
So Mayor and Commissioners, we were able to find money in actually this year's budget in 23.
Great.
So we'll be going out with a RFQ once I discuss with the manager and the city attorney to get that, and hopefully have them do the data collection prior to the budget being approved, and have the up and running dashboard by late summer, early fall.
And maybe since we do have members of the public that are here, can you briefly explain what the software does?
Public.
I'm sure there's people.
Really quickly, Mayor, this vehicle will drive around and collect a bunch of data points that tells us what the condition of the sidewalks in. They'll identify trip hazards, they'll identify missing sidewalks, the width of sidewalks, ADA ramps, whether they're compliant or not. Also, they'll look at signage, and we're at the pavement marking, so they also pick up the striping and the crosswalks where they're at. And also the areas of the signs will also be, so that we'll have a list of what's out there and what needs to be addressed. And then we can move forward with identifying what level of funding we really need to be at for either a maintenance or sidewalk district or whatever, however we look at moving forward with sidewalks.
And just very briefly, Mayor, Commissioners, but following that inventory, then stepping into the safe routes to school studies with school districts gives us better information by which to do that study and prioritize.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Please continue.
Okay, moving on to gas tax and sort of Barca as a whole. So as we mentioned a little bit earlier, the House Bill 76 was passed recently, and so that change We're waiting on some of the details to come out about exactly what'll happen, but basically. It'll take, right now, we get gas tax payments monthly. And we get Barca one time a year. And so what they're gonna do is at the end of the fiscal year. They'll do essentially a closeout payment for Barca. So the expected allocation this year for Barca was about 800,000. So what they're gonna do is take that 800,000, which were calendar year 22 revenues. And they'll take anything that's collected from January to June of this year and just pay it all at once, and that program will be done. And then going forward, what they haven't figured out yet is how often the allocations will come, whether it'll be monthly or quarterly. But they'll take the revenue that Barca would have generated, the revenue that gas tax generates, and we'll get one allocation on whatever time period it falls under. So for considerations here, the gas tax estimation was about 580,000 in revenue for this year. That's gonna fund essentially our mill and overlay, our pavement preservation portion of that, so the asphalt work. And then again, some conservative interest projections. And so the big ones that we have coming up would be 11th Avenue and the Phoenix subdivision area. I know, Mayor, as soon as we open it back up, we're gonna close it right back down again, but we'll get through it.
Yeah, 11th Avenue will go from Cruz to Montana. And that'll be a full depth mill.
Good.
So there'll be a brand new 4 inches of asphalt put on there.
Good. Thank you.
And then looking here at our Barca, again, a nice big note, my zero is not a typo. So prior to the House bill being passed, our plan was to present a budget amendment every year around April because the allocations come out in March. So that money would fund our summer work for that year. So every year we would come. So that was the plan, and that's kind of what this is based on. As that plays out and as we get closer to the final budget coming through, I'm sure we'll have good answers by then. And we'll have a better picture of exactly where these all fall. But ultimately, again, the money from this side is going to fund the chip seal program for this summer. And that's the one that we just awarded recently at a meeting. And so that'll be that one. I provided you a nice little map. So these are all the areas that we'll be doing chip seal with this summer. With maybe an exception along National, as Public Works has a project that's going to be coming up there soon. So we don't want to chip it and just have them cut right into it. So we may move a little section, and that would be sort of that long part on Schedule B in the yellow there. So part of that we may shift to another spot or wait and do that after.
Gotcha.
Right. Any questions before we move on to leader parking?
Commissioners? Let's continue.
Okay. So fleet, the city shop. Again, our operational considerations, so our Napa / IBS Solutions shop is fully operational for parts. And then we're working on expanding that to other things, whether it be office supplies or whatever else you'd like to order. So we have some departments that are working with us now, and they're buying some other things directly. And we're trying to get with the actual vendor and have them do some additional sourcing other places to try and get the best prices we can on parts. And then again, implementing the sustainability where we can. The solar panel project is really close to done. I know Leah Anderson and Ed Coleman are kind of working that one for us, and they would love for it to be finished. And so we're hoping again with the storage facility that would be on fleet property, we'll have some of those upgrades as well with it. Our fleet service charge, that's our sort of bulk that supports our personnel and operating costs for fleet. Over the years has been underfunded, still a little bit underfunded as far as compared to our budget. But we were able to increase it by $100,000 this year as far as what we recover from all the other departments. But with our sort of the skills of our mechanics and things, we've been able to keep a lot of repairs in-house. We've been able to, again, source parts a little better, so we were able to reduce some of the other charges that the departments get, like for outside repairs and parts, and make up a little bit on the other end, so it wasn't quite as big of a hit to increase 100,000 by this one in order to recover there. So in the next couple of years, we hope to have that. You know, again, we're doing sort of a step method where if you're already paying too little, you know, I'm not bumping you up. And if you're not paying enough, I'm not just jumping you 50% on your charge of an increase. We're limiting those increases year over year for the next couple of years to get everything back in line.
So our notable expenditures, the only one that we really couldn't reduce is fuel, obviously. So that last point there, increased fuel based on inflation and additional vehicles to the city fleet. But there are no significant changes to personnel, supplies, or purchase services. We are looking to purchase a TIG welder for stainless steel because we have moved, or not only our department, but other departments have moved to getting stainless steel, like our dump boxes, so they don't rust as quickly or hopefully at all. But we need the TIG welder to do repairs on that. Are there any questions on fleet?
Commissioners?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to be super annoying. I'm really sorry about that, but I'm going to have to step out in 1 second. So I was just going to make a quick comment on parking because I know you're about to start that. I'm going to have to walk out. I know there was a discussion about parklets and parking fees. I tried to find it in the budget. I could not. I didn't know if it was special permits, but I would like to flag it for discussion down the road with regard to parking and parklets and how we are charging people for those. Going forward, it doesn't have to be in this one. I don't think it has a significant impact on this budget. You're both staring at me. But if we could figure out which line that is and flag it for discussion, I would appreciate that.
The mayor and commissioners, we're going to be bringing our fees to you here in the near future, and that'll be part of that discussion. But in talking with the manager, we have already reduced that fee for this summer. In light of this being business friendly, and we've moved that down more than half to try to accommodate that business development downtown.
But and I'll just add, with the fees, Commissioner, I think it needs official action by the commission.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good. So with that, we'll jump right into parking. So as you can see, our central administration for the special events permitting, we've been talking about those. We have the ordinance coming up soon for that. And we're working on upgrading software to better assist in the enforcement side. So some of that may be some vehicle mounted camera systems where it automatically looks at the license plate, looks up to see if they're in the list of yes, I've paid or no, I'm not. And it'll just automatically pop up a message that tells the parking officer that they need to write a ticket for that. As opposed to them having to manually go around and check every single vehicle that they walk.
So right now they do that, so you scan each individual license plate. So we're looking to do efficiencies throughout the parking. And along with this upgrading the software for better enforcement, we're also upgrading the software to provide for online bill pay for our customers. So to try to give as much flexibility for our customers.
You bet.
So discussions on rate and fee increases, again, we won't go too in depth on some of our fees for parking here. We'll save that for our fee meeting. But ultimately, the one big one that we'll probably come up with is going to be our permit rates. So as we sort of get to the capital side over there, you'll see that we do have some constraints in our budget as unfunded liabilities. And so the parking's CIP is pretty robust. A lot of them are ADA related that we have to work on with our transition plan. And so part of that discussion on the fees is that we want to take a similar approach to what we do with fleet, where the rate right now might be $65 and it should be $100. We know we can't make that jump all at one time. And so we'll want to talk about how do we go through that process over the next couple of years to get it where it needs to be. So that we can start to chip away at some of those unfunded liabilities that we have that aren't going to go away we just can't afford to do right now. And then other than that, with revenue, on the revenue side, you'll see if you look line by line through our revenue, you'll see that some of them have, you know, maybe a zero where there was money before, or some of them had a zero before and now have a lot of money in them. Those are just preferential movements by mostly by employers. So they might have had their employees parking on the street. Now they move them to a lot. And so it's just a different line item of revenue, but for the most part, it's pretty static.
So our notable expenditures removed some of the parking repairs into capital because we're fixing those that infrastructure. We are going to see a kiosk service fee, right, raising to about an additional 8%. And they're just these fees that are just keep getting passed on. So as we discussed yesterday, potentially moving some of those if we can into Tyler payments will be beneficial for the city. The PCOs were among part of the market study outliers. So that's where you'll see that increase in personnel. They were identified as one of the lowest market outliers. So we adjusted those. Our security cameras, we're going to be adding a few of those to our garages. They have been greatly helpful to PD for numerous crimes. So we're going to add a few to where we have some blind spots. And maintenance of vehicles due for maintenance vehicles due for replacement. We have the majority of the capital is to address our ADA identified ADA issues. And as Chris already said, we have the $200,000 capital budget constraints. We got about the liabilities. Any questions?
Commissioners, go ahead.
And I just don't know if I'm not seeing it in here. Is the intercap loan for the kiosks that happened like, I guess that was, I don't know if that was like FY19.
Yeah.
Is that done?
No.
No.
Our next mayor and commissioners, our next loan to be complete will be the Jackson Street garage. And that'll be done in 2025.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't have the exact date, to be honest.
Maybe just whenever you get a chance.
Any other comments from the commission? Please continue.
All right, Mayor, our last one is transit. So we just talked about this yesterday. So I won't spend a lot of time on this. We do have some answers for the questions that were asked yesterday. So we'll provide some of that information. So Commissioner Dean, to your question on the ridership. So we did our first 3 quarters of the fiscal year versus last year. So July through March. So for that time period, this year was just over 41,000 rides so far. Compared to the prior year was only about 21,000. So we're about 93% over the same time period last year.
That's a lot.
Then there was a question of mileage, how much miles are spent inside the city versus for the East Valley. So total about 144,000 miles. The East Valley accounts for about 13% of that, or 18,600 miles.
That's a lot of miles.
Oh, good question. Is that consistent with the contribution that is made for that?
So Mayor and Commissioner Dean, their contribution is about 5% of our total budget.
Oh, really? It might be worth a conversation.
Yeah, they're always saying that, so it's about.
It'll be a swap with the historic preservation.
Okay.
Right, and then again, so our last point really to talk about on transit, again, going back to the fair discussion, so and we'll again bring that with the rest of our fees and rate discussions to try and get a better answer. And so, but we do have, I think, one of the things that David touched on a little bit yesterday, that we'll explain a little more, is that we'll have wherever the rate lands, will sort of be the base rate for a ride. And then we'll have some different options for discounted plans, so whether it be a senior or military, or we have a plan to do, if you buy a monthly pass, you essentially would get a week free. If you buy an annual pass, you'd get, I think, 2 months free. So we're trying to provide some options and make it a very accessible feature. To give you some comparisons to think about on the rate, I halfway scheduled myself a ride on Uber this afternoon to see what it would cost. To me to go from our facility out there at the fleet to the building here was about $15. And to go from the transit facility to the city county building was about $9. To give you an idea of the difference.
Say that. It's out of pocket.
I didn't schedule the ride there. I took my own vehicle here today.
The one other information, Mayor and Commissioners, that I think you might find interesting is the cost per trip. When we were on running fixed routes, it was running about $40 per trip. Now with our more efficient demand response and a higher ridership, that's now down to $25 per trip is what we're seeing for costs. So we do need to find that fine line of the fees, but the demand response has been welcomed by the majority. We still have some people out there that want us to bring back the fixed routes. But overwhelmingly, the people are grateful for it because they can basically go from their home to wherever they need to and back again without having to worry about those other connections.
Any other questions, Commissioner Shirtliff?
Mayor Pro Tem, thank you very much. Director Kanaki, how does someone sign up for a trip? Is it a call, email, or app?
So Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioners, so you can call us. And we require 24-hour notice if you want a scheduled ride. You can call the same day, but we can't guarantee that you'll get that ride. But we have the call-in feature and we also have the app feature. And the app is fairly easy to navigate through, and especially once it's set up. And then you can just log in and get your ride scheduled, and if you do it by the app, it does give you notifications of the buses, 5 minutes out or whatever. So
Go ahead.
Like, what would it take for us to get to the point where we wouldn't need a whole 24-hour notice? Staffing.
Mayor Pro Tem or Mayor and Commissioners, that is to adjust the scheduling for the computer software to provide the scheduling for that next day. I don't know what the minimum time frame is. I don't know if it's 24 hours is the minimum of the software, but we can definitely take a look at that.
I think that'd be helpful, just because I know people like a doctor will call you up and say, hey, we have an opening this afternoon.
So most of our rides, if you call, we can get you.
Okay.
It just might not be, we might not be able to pick you up at 8:30. We might have to pick you up at 8:15, so you might have to wait at the doctor's office a little bit longer. Or 8, but we typically, I don't remember what the percentage is, but we are very high percentage of being able to help accommodate the same.
Yeah, I don't believe that we've had to turn away any ride requests, even on same day.
Okay.
If they're willing to wait a little bit longer, right? It's not always an immediate availability. But I believe we've been able to accommodate all of them, I think, to this point.
Last thing, I'm curious I think it'd be really neat if people did consider starting to use this kind of thing. I think from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's normally like a particular demographic that is using our capital transit system, and not necessarily someone like, maybe it is people going to work every day. But I guess what would it take for us to maybe expand it to broader demographics? And is that in the cards?
When you say broader, what do you mean?
Beyond, besides just people like who having it be like a true alternative. Not out of necessity because, someone can't drive or they need assistance to get to a doctor's appointment or.
So Mayor and Commissioners, I think that's what we've tried to impose in our new fees. First responders, veterans. Disabled, but also with the monthly passes. So our monthly passes, the way we considered that pass would be, you're using the bus to go to and from work. So our rates for those passes only contemplate 1-2 rides per day, going to work and coming back. But those passes would be unlimited passes. So you could go to the store, and that's how we're looking to incentivize by giving a broader selection of passes to try to incentivize the bus ridership. And once that ridership keeps increasing, then we can purchase more buses and add more staff. And then as ridership, it just keeps kind of expanding on what we can and can do versus what we can't.
Maybe that's a place, whenever Jake gets involved in some capacity when those come out, maybe that might be helpful.
Please continue.
And this is just our info from yesterday.
So we have really no capital expenditures there.
Any other questions from the commission? Yes.
Mayor, I just wanted to answer Commissioner Dean's question earlier about when the Interpac loan expires, and it's in 2031.
How much is left on it, do you know? Sorry, I should have asked that.
She's planning on paying it all.
A little over 400,000.
Oh, that's nothing for her.
That's not.
Are you saying me?
Yeah.
Start a fundraiser.
Any questions from the commission? Thank you. Okay, so the next thing here is Director Danielson. You want to talk about the schedule?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I just wanted to thank the commission for being flexible with adding another special meeting. I've just updated this with the information, especially on May 17th. On that meeting, we'll be bringing a lot of those decision points for the commission to consider for funding options. Director McMahon will be presenting the wage and benefit study information along with the cost of living information, and we'll be speaking to health insurance, the health insurance levy. We'll also be bringing some just administrative budgets that include the GEO debt fund, the lighting district funds, and insurance funds, copier revolving funds, just for your review and consideration. And there may also be, and then there'll also be another overview of the where we're at with the general fund at this point in time. And then I have also scheduled the business improvement district and the tourism business improvement district discussion of their fiscal 24 work plans and budgets on the June 7th administrative meeting. I have been in contact with the BID. They have proposed a new assessment methodology that they'll be presenting to the commission on the 7th. We've discussed that with them, and that they'll bring that forward for your consideration. And then we'll bring their resolutions thereafter. The presentation of the preliminary budget will be on June 12th, with adoption of the preliminary budget on June 26th. And then we'll be bringing our assessments and assessment resolutions, like, for example, our street assessments, our landfill assessments, those in July and August, and then a final budget adoption in September after we received certified values from the Department of Revenue.
Is that date set in stone? I'm a little leery when it comes to September 11th, so just me. Oh, yeah. So.
Leery about what?
Is that date set in stone, September 11th?
that's when the commission meeting is, so if you'd like to,
So it is sentence.
Well, then, I mean.
if you'd like to change that.
No,
you
no,
certainly
fine.
can.
She'll be taking over that.
So any other questions or comments on the calendar or anything that you would like to add to the conversations? We can certainly put that on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So want to confirm that we all are clear. May 17th is when you want the final general fund savings, formerly ARPA, request from the commission to staff, correct?
I believe we have scheduled the ARPA discussion, the general fund savings on May 25th.
I mean, but our list to you by that date. I think that's what Amanda had
Please,
said.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and will
please,
that
thank-
be,
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait, let me-
so we're
let me-
talking about on the 25th, but we need to send it to staff, each of our individual ones to staff by the 17th.
You're confusing me here, because when you say individual ones, what do you mean by that?
Like, if we have, for example, Commissioner Logan.
No, but I believe we had allocated 7 priorities initially. We have to complete those priorities before we start looking elsewhere. Because we sent all the priorities in and they were categorized by the city. And they selected 7 priorities. And we haven't completed those. So I'm not saying you can't send something in, but we got to start focusing on those priorities that we collected, that we said we're going to look into.
Mr. Mayor, I'm kind of wondering if, so. There have, I think Commissioner Dean has had a idea or two. I've had my own and I think the final, the 25th. I think we're going to talk about what's left of the 7. And possibly others, if, because we selected the 3, the top 3. But then we just kind of stalled out a little bit. You know, we didn't drive on with what do we do with the remaining 4, let's say, and so that's where I started throwing things out of left field and all that. But when I think we have the opportunity on the 25th to consider the other 4 that are on the table and others from left field, is that okay? We can say, and I think staff was looking maybe at the 17th at having any individual ideas.
I think there's an email from Amanda. It's prompting me just because Amanda had sent us all an email to say the 17th, so I think it could get on the noticed meeting.
Yes, Mayor and Commission, Amanda will need any of your additional requests or considerations by the 17th, so we can make sure it's in the packet for the May 25th meeting.
Gotcha. I'm sorry.
No, that's it. That's all. I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that that's what Amanda was requesting.
And Mayor, we'll also be having that conversation in conjunction with the general capital funding requests as well. We'll have that at the same.
But any others? All right. Let me see. Is there anyone from the public wishes to address the commission? Madam Clerk.
Mayor and Commissioners, I see no hand raised and have no public comment online.
Consensus discussion, consensus to city manager. Is there any confusion in what you heard today?
Mayor, I am not at all confused.
No. Okay, keep on rolling. Are you clear on what to do next?
Yes, sir. I
Follow
am.
through, okay. Any final discussion from the commission? This meeting is adjourned.